Making time to be on the show. So glad to have you here, man.
Zach, it's an honor, man. Super excited to chat with you, brother.
We had a really fun chat before we hit record about bald eagles. I won't repeat it all, but super jealous of the view out your window with the river and bald eagles flying by, man. That is super cool. Jealous, jealous.
Yeah, if you can live anywhere, Zach, you might as well live somewhere that's fun and engaging and
True,
you want to live.
true. Amen to that. Amen to that. I chose this. And to be fair, I'm only a mile from Lake Michigan, which is absolutely stunning. So I'm pretty blessed. But Dave, here's where I want to begin. There's so many cool places in your life, but you are known for being a bit of a marketing madman, if you will, and getting meetings with big clients. I've heard that some of your methods are, let's use the word innovative. That would be a good engineering word for that. And I'd love to hear, man. Tell me, like, what stands out to you as that absolutely most outlandish, crazy thing that Dave's ever done to get a meeting?
Oh, the craziest thing I've ever done to get a meeting. Wow. That's a big box right there, Zach. Like that's
Okay,
huge. So
okay.
some of the things that we've done in our history, it was probably 7 years ago now. There were a handful of clients for my first company that I owned that were really, really lucrative. Like we knew that they were going to be worth at least $250,000 a year, probably more. And so we were like, what can we send them? What can we get to the chief marketing officers? It's just going to really engage them. So what we did was we shipped them the full size Yeti coolers, right? They were like $400, $450 a piece, or I can't even remember
Okay.
how much they are now.
Okay.
They're expensive. And we put a padlock on them. Okay. And it had a note on the box and it said, hey, have lunch with me, Dave. I'll bring a key for the padlock and let's talk about your digital advertising needs. And that was pretty crazy, right? We got to first, it's hard to find a box that you can just ship a Yeti cooler in. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
knew that,
No,
Zach, but
I believe
uh,
that.
yeah, it's kind of hard. And FedEx kind of looks at you like you're crazy when you say, hey, I need to ship this. They're like, is it a coffin? Like, is there a
Yeah,
person?
yeah.
What's going on here? This thing is huge. But it was highly effective. We got 4 out of the 5 meetings.
Oh,
I don't know what
wow.
happened to the other one, by the way. It got delivered. I
Oh,
guess I guess
somebody
that guy.
bolt cutter on a,
I know.
a
I
Yeti.
was like,
Okay.
man, I okay, cool. But yeah, so that's a thing that we've done. We send pinatas in the mail all the time now to get people's attention,
All right.
which is a good time. We also do messages in a bottle and tubular mail, handwritten notes. We do all sorts of stuff through snail mail. People think
Yeah,
that that's crazy, Zach, but like it's highly effective. It has 100% open rate if you land, right? Everybody's going to open their mail.
I like that.
Yeah.
Tell
Why
me,
do you
tell
like
me
that?
real quick, what was inside the Yeti? Or was it simply, hey, if you want to be able to use the Yeti,
You want to be able to
I
use
got to
the
bring the
Yeti.
key.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so the Yeti
There's
was
no.
empty.
Yeah.
Nothing in the Yeti.
Nothing in the Yeti. There's stuff in the pinatas, which is cool.
Sure, totally.
But yeah, we're always trying to find something new, right? Like most people think, hey, there's this really interesting study done by Harvard and Oxford. They looked at 2004, how many impressions did a company need to have in order for a person to remember the company's name in a
Yes.
ish what they do. Have you heard about this, Zach?
I don't know if this exact one, but I look at these kind of stats all the time,
Okay.
but keep going.
So what they found was in 2004, you needed 4 impressions over the course of like 12 months to be memorable. So then they updated this in 2018. And what they found is in 2018, it was 17 touches.
Wow.
And so there's this thought, right? Like, well, you just need to have more impressions. And what that does is it makes a lot of digital advertising companies and social media firms really, really wealthy.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what we've done is we've maximized the number of impressions instead of maximizing the intent and the potential of one great impression.
Hmm.
And so, what if we did less work, but it was more impactful? And that's a lot of what my SDR firm, outsourced sales development rep firm, really tries to do.
What I like about this, you asked a moment ago, is I work with engineering leaders, many of whom, probably 80% of our clients are W-2 employees at some large organization that has a big engineering team. And one thing that comes up a lot, Dave, is say you're an engineering manager or an engineering director, and you want to build a relationship with that CTO or that dream mentor who's built the career that you desire to build, and you're looking for help on those next steps or looking for sponsorship, and you want to build that relationship. Lots of engineering leaders really struggle with, how do I possibly get their attention, let alone bring something of value into that first meeting. We way overthink and then don't do anything. And I just love this heartbeat of, maybe it's not as hard as it seems, and just be creative and be willing to do something that might feel, to, especially to an engineer, pretty outlandish, but could open that door in a unique way. So I'm curious for your perspective. Like, Dave, if you were an engineering director at some company and you really wanted to talk to the CTO of an organization that you'd love to work for in the future, what would be the first ideas that come to mind for you on how you'd get their attention?
Some of the things that I've done in the past is I'd go check out their social media, because a lot of people have social media that's accessible, right? Twitter, Instagram come to mind, and they're going to be talking about things that aren't necessarily business related. They may be, right? But they also may just be talking about their love of a sports team or of their alma mater, or, hey, they're taking their kids to go see the new Star Wars movie or whatever that is. And then I've found that two things are really impactful whenever you're like, hey, what do I do? One is, if they have kids and they're actively talking about them on social, you can do this in a non-creepy way. You can send them a gift for their kids. If you're wanting to make an impression on a person, give their kids a gift, right? A lot of people who are listening to this have kids or their aunts and uncles or whatever, right? And so one of the things that I've noticed over and over again is, kids want attention. They want your time. They don't care about your gifts. However, if your kids or kids that you love get a gift from someone that's like, hey, I've been working, and some people that I want to work with or want to work with me sent me this gift for you, that makes them feel good about what dad, mom, aunt, uncle are up to.
That's really clever. I like that.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is that sometimes just going like really above and beyond, like there's this, I'll tell a story because I think it works. We had this company that, this was a while ago, right? And I knew that this company was like a perfect fit for one of my companies to like represent and work with. And so I had had this great conversation with this guy. And one of the things that I learned from a buddy of mine who was in Hollywood for decades, he said, one of the worst things that can happen in Hollywood is you have a great meeting.
Oh, okay.
He was like, because what'll happen is you have a great meeting and then nothing happens, right? The project gets tabled, the script doesn't get picked up, the money doesn't get funded. So I took that and I went, okay, you can have great sales meetings, you can have great interviews, right? You can have these great meetings, and what'll happen is the next step won't be taken. So what I did with this guy was exactly what I'm talking about. I was like, hey, I think this guy's perfect. I really want to work with this company. I know we can get them results. I wonder what he's got on his social. So I found his Twitter, and I realized that he was like a raging soccer fan. And I was like, okay, I can't figure out what professional team he likes, but he lives in Denver, Colorado. He's got to be a U.S. men's national team fan. So I went and found like a mini soccer ball that had been signed by the U.S. men's national team's best player. It cost $180. I said, hey, man, I've got a gift. I want to send it to your house. It's not, don't worry, it's nothing bad. It's something cool. Can I get your address? And he was like, of course. So I sent it to him. I didn't hear anything back for a couple of weeks. And then Zach, all of a sudden, I was like, hey, man, I just want to make sure that you got the gift that I sent you. And he's like, dude, I did. I'm so sorry. I didn't follow up and blah, blah, blah. They became a client. They had so much success that they had to pause our marketing services because it like overwhelmed their ability to fulfill. And then they came back a few months later and they're like, okay, let's re-engage. And they're having great success again. And one of the things that I asked that guy was, he was like, I was like, hey, why work with us? He said, no one's ever sent me a gift that was like $200. He was like, that was so fun. And he's like, I love it. It sits on my shelf behind me for work. And so I think it's just having meaningful interactions with people is really the key.
I love it. I love it. Well, I hope every engineering leader takes to heart the idea that if you'll just invest a little energy up front to get to know who that person is, what their passions might be, and get creative at token value. That's not about bribery or anything. It's like, of course, this is not legal advice. We're not here from HR, but you know, I guess that's an awesome, awesome thing. So, well, Dave, take us back to your story, age 29, the ripe old age of 29, and you're hustling You know, here you are, this serial entrepreneur going after it in life, and the doctor asks you a rather stinging question. Are you ready for your heart attack? Not what we want to hear at that point. So, what's going on in your life at that time, and why did the doc ask you that question?
I started my first grown-up business at 25. By that time, by the age of 29, I had grown it to seven figures. So it was, only 7% of all businesses in the US hit seven figures. So by all accounts, I was successful. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. It was great. I had two young kids under the age of 3 at the house. Wife and I are married. Everything's cool. I'm working a lot, and they did a stress test, and they're like, "Hey, you're the most stressed out person we've tested. We've tested 4,500 people. Like you're the top." What had happened, honestly, Zach, is what I think happens to a lot of professionals that are driving hard. I stopped taking care of myself. When I was growing up, I was a multi-sport athlete on varsity. I was in good shape. And then I started a family, started a business, started climbing the ladder, stopped working out, stopped meditating. I stopped taking care of myself. And so I really had to, at that point, begin this journey of how do I create a business or businesses that allow me to live my life, not die young.
Yeah.
And how can I make it so that I have practices that really allow me to be less stressed? And so 3 days after that, I just would tell myself, your only goal today is to drink a glass of water completely and to go for a 5-minute walk, right? And
this was 3 days after the stress test.
3 days after the stress test. Because one of the things that people do whenever they hear something like that is they go, I'm going to go
all
crazy.
Yeah.
And it never works.
Yeah.
And so you have to take a bite-sized approach to this and say, okay, what does it really look like for me to approach this in a relevant manner? And so it took a long time for me to build up to what I do today, but I started out with a glass of water and a 5-minute walk.
Yes.
And if I did anything more than that, if I had 2 glasses of water that day, if I went for a 20-minute walk, if I went and worked out at the gym, that was extra. My only goal was 5 minutes and a glass of water. Well, now
that's really good.
Now
we'll back up. Yeah. Don't tell us about now yet. Because I want to, I know everybody wants to hear, hey, what's the ideal life? But what was it that actually triggered you to go do the stress test? Was there something that happened, or did your spouse say, like, dude, what was it that actually prompted that action?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was not feeling well. I was not sleeping well.
Okay.
And I also realized, I haven't had a physical since I was like 18. Okay. And I'm getting close to 30. Maybe I should go do that, right? I had been going to a chiropractor, and he was like, dude, I think you should go get some tests.
Okay.
And so between my wife, my own thoughts, my chiropractor, I was like, all right, well, let's go just see what's under the hood, doc. And so that's really what initiated that.
Okay. Honestly, that's awesome. So many times I hear the story, and we've had other people on this podcast who, it's a rock bottom type moment, or a real scare, a heart attack or something that happens. And it sounds like you managed to catch this before it had a permanent impact in your life, which is a real blessing. But I'm curious, so you mentioned it's not sleeping well, not feeling well. What were the things, if you were to go back and you could kind of help your previous self before that awareness, what types of signs were you seeing that maybe that engineering leader listening to our chat might check their own boxes and say, am I experiencing some of those same things?
Yeah, great question, Zach. Some of those things were brain fog. Even in my 20s, I was like, man, I just can't get the right answer as quick as I should be able to. I felt extremely fatigued all the time, just exhausted. Things that I used to enjoy, I just didn't anymore. Some people may even call it mild depression. I just wasn't interested in my hobbies. I wasn't enjoying work as much as I used to. And honestly, I started to use food and alcohol to numb some of that, and TV as well. I was just like, I would work and work and work. And then I'd be like, I need to come down off a 12-hour day? How do I come down off a 12-hour day? I haven't eaten enough today, so my body's in starvation. These are things that I understand
Yes.
now, but I didn't understand at
Yes.
the time. But my body's in starvation mode. I had maybe had 300 calories all day and 5 cups of coffee. I was drinking too much caffeine, like absurd amounts of coffee every day.
Yeah.
And so I was putting my body in this stress cycle. And then what I'd do at night is I'd go, well, now my body's going to eat and I'm going to have a
Mhm.
couple drinks to calm myself down. And then I'm going to watch some TV or something, play some video games, whatever, to just calm myself down. And I just didn't have anything that was like, oh, that's my creative outlet. Oh, that's my de-stress outlet. And so those are my triggers now is like, hey, if I'm out of a routine where I'm taking care of myself, if I start to see my calorie intake go to like switch at different points of the day instead of being leveled across the board,
Mhm.
there are all sorts of things that I just go, all right, I can't keep doing this. And there's a healthiness if you are in a season where you can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We know that it's going to be slower when this project's done, and the project is going to complete in 3 weeks because we have to get it done. Then you can give yourself some grace to be like, okay, for the next 3 weeks, I'm in survival.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the day 22 is the day that I just go, I'm sleeping, I'm taking a nap, whatever that is.
I think that's a really important distinction. One thing I see with engineering leaders a lot, Dave, is we convince ourselves that there is a day 22, but then you get to day 14 and well, we got 3 more weeks to go. And then you get to day
Yeah.
20. And next thing you know, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months later, you haven't changed that pattern at all. And that's when we get a lot of calls because that burnout derails their whole life. But the other thing I want to highlight that I experienced was that doing the things you love and not loving it. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a really great indicator that there's something fundamentally wrong in your body and mind when you can, for me, I remember back during my challenging time of my marriage is failing, I'm burning out, everything is literally crashing in my world around me, and I would go out dancing, which for those who listen to the Happy Engineer podcast, they know that I have a history in ballroom and Latin and swing dancing. I used to compete. I instructed for a while and kept my engineering mind balanced by being a dancer. Well, I love dancing. And during that time, Dave, I could go out dancing and just like nothing, no energy, no joy, no desire, rather than walking up to all these beautiful ladies and taking them out on the dance floor and having a great time. I'm having another drink at the bar. I'm sticking around by myself in the corner talking to another guy. Like, huge indication around things are not working. To double down on that, if that's you, listen to Dave. Like, it's time to take action. So
Yeah.
you have the stress test. Doc says this is serious. You got to take action. And starting with tiny habits. I love that approach. Tell us a little bit about your journey then from a glass of water and 5 minutes of walking to where you are today. How did that progress? What were the bumps in the road? What'd you learn?
There were so many things that I learned. For a long time, I kept driving to the gym. So I finally got through the point of time where it was like, okay, I'm I'm exercising regularly. I want to get back into weightlifting. I was a competitive weightlifter in high school. And so
Nice.
I've always found enjoyment in that. But doesn't cardio has felt like work, weightlifting feels like play. And so I started weightlifting again, but every gym that was close to me was not that close to me. I was living in Texas and everything was a 15-minute drive at least. And there's something weird in our, I'm sure that you've experienced this, Zach. If there's a little bit of resistance to something that you want to do, especially when you have a family, it amplifies it, right? So I would do this game where I'd go, well, I've got to drive 15 minutes to the gym, and then I'm going to get there and I'm going to work out for 30, 45 minutes. And then I'm going to have to drive 15 minutes back, which means in reality, my wife is at home with our kids by herself for an hour to an hour and a half without me. And I've only really worked out for 30, 45 minutes. And so it
Mm,
became a hindrance because it's hard to be a stay-at-home parent with small kids.
Totally.
Like it just
Totally.
is. And I've told her many times I could not do what she has done. And so it was a burden. So one of the things I started to realize over time was I needed to have a gym in my own house, right? Like I just needed to create a space where I could work out in my own house. That was a thing that took a while to come to fruition just because it's not always easy when you live in a smaller house and you're like, hey, I need to add a gym. Oh, but we're adding children. So I had to wait on that a bit, but it was a realization that I had for a while. And it was like, well, when we move, and so when we did move, I was like, yeah, one of the rooms is my gym. Another thing that I realized in the process was I needed to make meditation a bigger part of my life.
Okay.
I grew up in the church and I prayed a lot. And one of the things that's fascinating about atheists and religious people and Christians and Buddhists, doesn't matter what background you come from, we know that prayer and meditation activate the same parts of our brains. And so whether you're a religious person or not, praying or meditating, everyone agrees is super helpful and healthy for our brains. So I just went, I need to start doing this every day. It's going to help me. And I just would find little spots to do that, to meditate. And sometimes I would have a guided meditation, and other times I would have meditations that were just open-ended. There are so many more apps now than there were when I started doing this that can help you with that.
Yeah,
One of the things that I found that I love that may be interesting to people that are listening to this podcast that I use now that I find insanely beneficial, and it's all guided. It's called the Gateway Experience. Have you heard of this, Zach?
No, this one's new for me.
Brother, I'm about to give
Come on, rock my world.
gift,
Let's
man.
hear it. Yes.
So back in the 70s and 80s, the CIA said, hey, I wonder if we can astrally project, if that's a real thing, because that's a thing that's like an Eastern religious idea. And so they solicited a group to start putting together meditations to see if this was possible. And so the CIA, as a Freedom of Information Act, and because we paid for it, released all the meditative files, like all of the files a few years ago. I think it actually happened in early 2020. And so
interesting.
So you guys can actually go get this online. You can search the Gateway Experience. Because it's open source, it's our government, we can go get it anywhere you want. And you can download these, and they stack on top of each other. So every single lesson is what they call them. It's a meditation, will teach you a new skill, and it just allows you to start to engage. And one of the things that I've talked with many of my more spiritual woo-woo friends is they're like, man, some of my deepest meditations happen when I listen to this. And then I've had some friends that have never engaged with meditation for a second. And they go, wow, if that's what meditation's like after just 2 sessions, they're like, I want to do that. So it's a really helpful resource. I meditate every day now, and it's extremely beneficial.
That's amazing. And I also meditate every day. I love right now the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. So for the people who want to geek out and get really into it, sometimes you need to see the science when you have that engineering brain to buy into the investment of the time and energy, even if it just gets associated with woo-woo. Sometimes that's like I don't want to do it for the technical science-minded person. But Dr. Joe's work is absolutely brilliant with the brain scans and all the data and just the demonstration of that. So I have found that really helpful for me as to what's actually happening in my neurochemistry and in my body as a result of the investment in that time. And when you see the ROI then in your real life after you start doing it, then it's a no-brainer. But sometimes getting over that threshold of, do I really want to do this? You just need to see the raw data. So that's a great resource. Dave, I'm going to find that Gateway piece. We'll put links in the show notes to that. That sounds incredible. Tell me then, as you go through this journey in your own life of healing and creating balance, and we don't have time to go into all your successes, but like that's when things really took off for you in terms of the business results as well. Is that right?
Yeah. It's hilarious, Zach. If you take care of yourself, you're able to function better. And when you function better, you get better results.
Go figure. Okay. Well, this is a novel concept. Tell me more.
It's interesting, man. I think that one of the things that's really hammered into our society is codependency, right? We even talk about codependency as a way to describe romantic love, and that's the ideal. One of the things that I started to realize as I meditated and worked out more and also went to therapy, right, is that
Sure.
I had a very codependent relationship with my spouse. And she is fantastic. I mean, absolutely rock star. I outkicked my coverage on that one, right? I also needed to readjust how I was engaging with her. And so as I did that, obviously it made the relationship more challenging for a time, for probably a couple of years there, because we disrupted the balance that we created. And it's work worth doing. And so what's occurred out of that is we now just are really intense about what is going to make our kids are getting older. We realize that we only have so much time with them before they're out of the house. It happens fast. So what are the rhythms? What are the habits that we want to hold as a family? And as we look at those and we started to really embrace those, all of a sudden the businesses just started to up level. And some of the things that I saw in the business space was I would just show up to meetings and be so calm. My staff describes, I've had staff that saw me back then.
Sure. Pre
and I have
post,
staff that have seen me now, and they describe those two different iterations of Dave as very different people. So they call the first go around as Madman Dave. They're like, you were just, they're like, it was crazy. So they're like, and now they're like, you're mountain hippie Dave, is how they would describe me.
Yes.
And
Mountain hippie Dave.
And I go, okay, what's the difference? And they said, they really gave me the description of, you show up to meetings, you're calm. You always feel grounded. The team may be having very spirited discussions about what's best for the company that we're talking about, that I'm in the meeting for. And you just come in with the, hey guys, everything's fine. Nothing's wrong here. Let's talk about what's best. You bring a grounding presence to everyone, and everyone feels at ease whenever you're in the room. And so even if there is something that's not going right with a business right this second, no one in the room is afraid, because we know that we have a steady hand that's guiding the ship. Cool. And so that's really the big difference, right? Is that I'm able to see more just because I'm not manically chasing my tails.
Yeah, that's powerful. So tell me then, and I think I'm so passionate about this, and I know that the engineering leaders who I coach in our programs share this passion as well, that not only do we want to begin with that self-awareness and self-care and self-love to get our lives on track, so because we can't give what we don't have, but then there's that immediate passion that triggers of, okay, now that my life is working and I'm taking care of myself, I want to give that to the people I work with and the people I love and help as well. And you've been really successful in caring and investing in the people in your businesses as the gateway to business success. Tell us about that mindset and that culture that you've created, and maybe even specific examples of what that looks like with this idea of conscious capitalism and people first. And when you get that piece right, the money and the success flows. Unpack how that plays out from Dave taking care of Dave to Dave helping take care of all these amazing people in your companies.
I started my first business with this crazy idea that if you love your people and you treat them well, then you're going to get the best out of them. And
wait, what?
I know. So we've honed over the years 6 core values, and now all 8 companies that I own embody or own those 6 core values across the board. Yes. I'm actually writing a book about it. It's going to be released in January. Fingers crossed. We're awesome. We're in that last editing phase where I hate the entire book, which everybody that I know that's written a book, Zach, is like, that means it's done.
Yeah, you're perfect. It's perfect.
But it's 6 core values that really help us navigate as a company how we engage with our staff. The order of those is important. So the first one is tenacity. The second one is curiosity. The third is initiative. The fourth is accountability. The fifth is transparency. And the sixth is humanity. And so what we say is to our general staff, hey, listen, the order is important. You need to show up tenaciously. And if you have tenacity, it's going to lead to asking questions. Why did that work? Why did
Yeah.
that not work? And then as those questions take shape and you start to get answers, you should take initiative out of those answers, and it should lead to you taking an action. And then the actions that you take that could be positive, hey, we had a win, or negative, wow, that didn't work, you have to be accountable to, which then leads to being transparent with your supervisors and your teammates to be like, hey, this is what we saw in the project. This is what's going on, which then leads to a human response, which could be, hey, failure's okay. That's how we get better. Or, hey, that's a win. Let's celebrate that, right? And so there's a flow to it.
Yes.
The thing that I want to highlight here is, because you're asking about how we lead this, we tell that to all of our staff, and then we have a different conversation in closed door meetings with our leaders. And the different conversation is they're in stacks of 3, right? We flip the order. So we say, okay, the staff, everybody else that's doing the work, they have to start with tenacity, curiosity, and initiative. And that's right. And in order for you to get into leadership, you have to have those in spades. But once you are in leadership, you actually have to lead with humanity, transparency, and accountability. And so when we lead in those ways, we actually open up the doors for the people that are doing the work to embody the first 3 in large dynamic ways. And so what we've found over and over again in different examples is that people feel seen and loved and cared for. And so they may have, their life may be on fire, and they feel like, I come into the digital office or the physical office,
Sure,
and
yes.
I feel seen, known, loved, and heard.
Yes.
One of the things we love to say is about transparency, we don't expect you to check your life at the door, because that's a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And so just let's be honest with each other about what's going on in our lives. And what that has resulted in is people saying, hey, I need to go to rehab, and being honest with their employers about where they're at. I need to take a leave of, I just had someone that's incredibly close to me. They're my adopted father, pass unexpectedly. And I thought that I could handle this after 5 days of bereavement leave. I can't. And they think they have to quit. And we go, actually, no, how about you just take a leave of absence? And the look on their face of pure, absolutely shock.
Yeah.
Just astounded that we would say that. It really breeds loyalty. And so then when people are on the team, our churn rate for employees is so low that it's outlandish.
Yeah.
And so it fosters a really good sense of teamwork and community.
I'm really excited that you took that to a core values discussion. And one of the things that too often happens, especially when I dig into these kinds of people first topics in the career space, is we look at compensation plans and we look at all these development opportunities and training, and all those things are good and really important. And I know sometimes you go even to the extremes in that, Dave. I saw a couple examples as we were prepping for our chat today about how you've tripled someone's salary in 3 years, and how you've hired really unique backgrounds for roles they aren't qualified for because of what they bring to the table as people. And I love all that stuff. But the values conversation, it keeps coming back as so central. And what I want to highlight is this ranking. It does matter, the order, how they show up, and the way we work through this. In my coaching program, one of my signature programs we go through, we talk through values in a really deep way, and we do a ranking exercise. And I get a lot of pushback from people about, well, what do you mean I have to rank order these? And I remind them, at the end of the day, the rank matters because how you decide and what behavior you exhibit is going to be dictated currently by the rank that you already have. And that may be something you're subconscious or blind to. So let's just get clear on what you actually value today, because you may tell me you value adventure, but if the truth is that you value safety or protection or security, yeah, you might value both of those things, but clearly the rank order is safety first and adventure's number 10. So it's impacting your decisions. And if you want to be a different person, then we got to get really intentional about starting to show up and act in accordance with a new order of these values. I've never heard somebody in a company context, out of hundreds of conversations about values in companies, who actually has said, here's our 5 values or our 7 values or whatever, and the order matters. You're the first one I've ever heard say that. So I think that's amazing. And this idea of flipping from the leadership perspective then to say, yeah, if you're doing the work, it goes in this flow. And when you're leading the person, it's the opposite. I can't wait to read your book, Dave.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah,
Thanks.
this is going to be great. And so we'll make sure. So January, it's November 10th as we're recording this. Whenever it comes out, we'll make sure to add a link to the Amazon cart on the page. And I'd encourage every engineering leader listening, go get a copy of Dave's book when it comes out. Dave, tell us if there was any one life lesson or business lesson about leading people in a conscious way, in a values-centered way, how it shows up in real life. You got the concept of the values, but the moments that matter. Is there any one thing that you would say as a leader, get this one right, and you've taken a huge stride in making that come to life?
I think first and foremost, the conversations that I have with my leaders all the time when it comes to engaging with staff is, are we demonstrating humanity here? Are we demonstrating transparency? Are we demonstrating accountability? And the reason why that's really important is, look, business is hard. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an engineer, a low-level admin assistant, doesn't matter what your position is. It's hard because at the end of the day, it's always going to be a meritocracy, right? And so it's challenging, and it challenges us on a regular basis to make merit-based decisions in a human way. And in that, we find new ways of talking about why we're taking the actions that we're taking, that to some employees that are way down the pecking order need to understand. And so if you start with the core values that you have in your mind, then as you make decisions, you run them through, is this human? Is this transparent?
Yes.
Is this accountable? And if it's not, how do we make it so? And that really will help. As I like to say, the core values are the bumpers in the bowling alley or the bowling lane, right?
Yes.
And they make sure that we hit the pins down. We may not hit a perfect strike, but we're not going to miss everything.
I love that. So a simple action everyone can take: find the values that your company, your team lives by. Maybe your company has a very clear set of core values that you can extrapolate and run with. If not, make some, create some, and ask that question in the room. Really bring it to life, bring the list, ask the question. I love that. Well, Dave, before we wrap up, I want you to make sure and share with everybody, how can we get in touch with the work that you're doing? If people want to learn more or plug in with your amazing businesses, certainly we'll get a copy of your book linked up, but how can people get more Dave Valentine in their life if they want to?
You can find me on any social media channel. My handle is at RealDVal, RealDVal. I had a blue mark on Twitter before Elon started selling them. So I have to say it. It's just worth saying. And then
that's too funny. You heard it here. He had the blue check, folks.
That's right. It feels weird now. So anyways, and then you can also go check out my website, davevalentine.co. You can find me there. You can sign up for my newsletter. I'm also giving away a free e-course. If someone's in this, they're like, hey, I am an engineer, but I also own a company and I need some marketing help or whatever. I've put together an e-course from a workshop that I've been teaching for a long time now that shows people how to create what I call outrageous offers, something that sounds too good to be true, but actually helps businesses and companies scale. They can go get that for free on my site right now if they're listening to this. And then they can also check out when the book goes live.
Awesome. Dave, so we'll make sure all those links are easy to find in the show notes, and I encourage every engineering leader out there to go check it out. And even if you're a manager inside a large organization and you're not responsible for the marketing messaging going out to your clients or customers, I would still encourage you to go do Dave's course, because you're always selling ideas as an engineering leader inside the organization. And so often, Dave, the people I work with at Awaco who come to us for coaching, one of their number one barriers is that executive communication, that presence, that influence, their ability to engage an audience, et cetera. And to think about selling your innovation or idea for a project in this same fashion of like, what would be an outlandish or outrageous way that you could catch that senior leader's attention and show them the value of what you're proposing? You could massively differentiate yourself from any other engineering leader in your company if you show up that way. I guarantee it. So please check out Dave's course. Dave, we always end at the same place. I'm excited to hear your perspective. One of the things that I've seen and believe, I'm sure you know this as a leader in your own companies, as an entrepreneur and investor, great questions lead, great answers follow. And if we want better answers in our lives, we want to start asking better questions. So for that engineering leader who's been tuned in with us today, if they want to experience the kind of balance and success in their life that you have, or they're wanting more of the good life, so to speak, they want to be that happy engineer, what would be the best question that you would lead them with today?
Do you really love your life right now? And if not, why? Right. And so it's so easy to be like, oh, my life's great. It's great. It's great. No, sit with it. Take a beat. Breathe. Do you really love your life right now?
Ooh, gives me the goosies, as my one coach would call it. I love that. Dave, thank you so much for making time to be here today. This has been amazing.
Oh, it's been an honor, Zach. Thanks for the chat, brother.
Hello, my friend. Zach White here again, and I wanted to let you know that's all we've got for this episode of the Happy Engineer podcast. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to bring you this content. Just as a reminder, it would be amazing if you would subscribe and share this episode with any other engineers you know who may benefit from this. And if you're like me, I hope that you'll take some notes and, more importantly, take action. In our audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and any place that you go to find podcasts, there's a little more content from me about this episode in the debrief. If you really want to hear about how to put this into action, I'd encourage you to go grab that. But thank you for joining us for the video version of our interview today. And again, can't thank you enough for helping us to get the word out about the Happy Engineer podcast and what we're doing. If there's any way we can serve you, would love to do that. Go find us at oasisofcourage.com or reach out to me on social media at Oasis of Courage. And don't forget again to subscribe and click the bell to have notifications of upcoming releases of new episodes of the podcast. As always, I want to leave you with this. If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. So let's crush comfort, create courage, and let's do this.